You are listening to Conversations, an interview series hosted by Pastor Daniel Williams, discussing practical ways we can be pursuing and proclaiming Jesus in daily life. Brought to you by Redemption Church, Delray Beach.
Well, hey everyone, this is Pastor Daniel, and I am here with my good friend Jason Sanchez. That's right. Jason, you are an orphanage director, and could you just tell us a little bit about your background and what the Lord is currently calling you to do right there at this moment?
Yes. So 5 years ago, my wife and daughter and I moved from Puyallup, Washington to Bashina, Mexico, which is about 5 hours south of El Paso, Texas.
Yep.
To start an orphanage. And prior to that, I was on staff at a church in the Puyallup area for 9 years, doing youth worship and missions.
Yep. And that's really how we met.
Yes.
Started our friendship.
Yep.
And back when we were serving Jesus back in Washington State. And it's been really fun for us as a church to be able to support Jason, his family, the Sanchez family, Jackie, Ayantu, as they've gone out to Bashina, Mexico and started an orphanage. We've been supporting you guys for the last 5 years. It's sort of fun because as we started as a church, we supported you and you went out to Mexico. I came to Florida, but yet the Lord has just continued to have us partner and serve Jesus together. It's been amazing. So,
it has been cool.
Today I want to talk to you about parenting because not only are you an orphanage director, so you deal with many kids and family dynamics in that aspect, but you have a beautiful daughter, Ayantu, which you adopted from Ethiopia. And so I just thought, man, how do we pursue and proclaim Jesus in raising up our children? And so what would you say the biblical role of just being a parent is about? What does the Bible say about parenting?
Well, the Bible is very clear about parenting. We're to raise our children up in the ways of the Lord. And also the Bible talks about training our children. In the book of Deuteronomy, you read of how you're supposed to speak of the commandments, write the commandments, put them on your on the lamp stand, and you're basically supposed to just always be talking about the Lord to your kids.
Yeah. So how do you practically and personally teach and train your daughter in the things of the Lord? What are some things and practical things that you do?
My daughter's been really into, our daughter has been really into memorizing scripture. And so she has a number of verses that she's memorized. And so at night, almost every night, we'll either sing a little song, we'll pray, and then we will quote scripture together.
That's
and
very
so
cool.
One verse we're doing right now is Psalms 4:8. I will both lie down in peace and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. And then, the going to church together, and then afterwards, I try to be very intentional. Hey, what did you learn in your class, today? What did God teach you? What did you learn more of? And just engaging her about stuff, about the Lord, about church, about school, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So obviously our role as parents is to train our children, which takes discipline, and a lot of people are very rigid and structured in the way that they want to disciple and train up their ways in the Lord, their children in the Lord. But how does grace play in our parenting? How does grace play in your parenting?
Yeah, it's an ever evolving thing. I don't think you just arrive at it and you have it figured out. I know for me personally, I grew up in a very, very strict religious Christian home with a lot of legalism, and I had 4 siblings, and so you have that aspect of it, and I think some people swing to that side. And then I think you have others that swing to the complete opposite side with liberalism, and where you don't do anything. And I think grace meets right in the middle. And so you've got to have a little bit of both. And so for us, again, I'll look at my childhood, or our daughter will do something, and I'll think of, okay, what did my parents do? And then my wife and I, we'll talk about it, and then really think it through, knowing our daughter, knowing her strengths, knowing her weaknesses, knowing just who she is as a person, and really thinking through, okay, what is going to really teach her? I mean, that's what Jesus was all about. Yes, he was strict, and he was a discipliner, but he was also very gracious, very merciful, very loving. And I love that Jesus would just, there were times when he would lay it out and just say it, and there's other times he would talk it through. And so that's one of the biggest things for us, I think, in having grace play a part of it. Talking it through, thinking it through, and really engaging her and having her come to conclusions about, this is why I did this, and this is why I know it's wrong, versus us just saying, go to your room, you're grounded, or this or that. Kind of I guess the more legalistic side of things.
Yeah. So, Jason, how has being a parent helped you to understand God's grace more in just your relationship with Him?
Yeah, it has done a ton. And most recently was actually just a couple weeks ago when Antu's dog, Max, he was 9 months old when he got super sick and he died. And as we were trying to prepare her as he was getting sick, and we had taken him to the veterinarian, and as we're trying to prepare her for what might come, it was one of the hardest things we've ever dealt with thus far as a family, especially with her. And he died on a Saturday night, and Antu was sleeping, and so I knew first thing in the morning she was going to wake up, and so I went into her room and I just shared with her that he had died. And obviously, she began crying, and I was crying, and she was asking questions of why, and I'm so sad, and all of this stuff. And so as I'm holding my baby girl, and she's crying, and I'm crying, and in that moment, I think parents who have dealt with either loss or explaining something hard to their kids, or their kids are sick or whatnot, whenever you see your child grieve, you want to do anything and everything that you can to take that away.
Yeah.
Or if your child's getting picked on, you want to do everything you can. I mean, that's just what parents do. So in that moment, as I wanted to take away her hurt and her pain and her questions and all of these things, I began to just think about God, our Father, and us being His children. And that's how much He cares for us. And He scoops us in His arms, and He tells us He loves us, and He tells us it's going to be okay, and He tells us we're going to get through it, and He tells us that this is going to be for something greater. And He takes away those hurts, and He takes away those pains, and He does that. And so it was an incredible reminder as I sat there in my daughter's bedroom of just, man, my Abba Father, our King of Kings and Lord of Lords, man, He loves us.
Yeah.
And is amazing.
What are some things that have just helped you grow as a parent? I mean, obviously we want to do a good job. We want to do the best we can to raise our kids in the Lord. What are some things that you've practically done, whether it be books, conferences, just whatever? What are some things that have helped you grow as a parent?
Yeah, I think probably the main thing is just time. Parents, well, when you're not a parent, you don't really know how to be a parent. And then when you first become parents, and they're babies and then toddlers, and you just learn over time. And for us personally, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but for us personally, we haven't done a lot of like parenting classes or parenting 101 books or anything. We've just kind of taken it as it goes. My wife and I, we talk a lot in regards to our daughter. Hey, is this working? This isn't working. Obviously, my wife spends throughout the day, or when I'm traveling, she spends a little more time with our daughter, and so I'll say, hey, what works when she does this with you? And so we'll engage each other as a partnership, as helpmates. And then the other thing is really seeking to understand our daughter. I mean, she's 7, and so she has a personality, and she has strengths, she has weaknesses, she has things that she likes, she has things she doesn't like, and really seeking just to understand her as a person. That's been really helpful for us, because if hey, my kid is shy, or my kid has an anger problem, or has this, those are the things that are going to help you in the area of parenting.
Yeah.
And of course, counsel from other people, and books and some of the other things that are available. But I think for us personally, time of just doing it, and then it's super important for my wife and I, for us just to talk it out, and knowing your child, learning.
Yeah. So it's interesting because our children will grow up, they will have kids, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that we teach them now, they'll appreciate, they'll understand later on in life. What are some things for you that you appreciate now that you're an adult? Because at one point you were a child, that you are now saying, wow, that was really wise of my parents, even though I argued with them. I mean, we sort of all had that, right? We look back and they were right, I was wrong. What are some things that you appreciate now as you're an adult parenting from your parents that you want to pass on those principles as well?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. One is, growing up for us, church wasn't an option. And so we always went to church as a family. And I really appreciate that. Obviously, when I was younger, there were times when you don't appreciate that. But I was thankful for that, because that is now a part of our family. We go to church as a family. It's just not an option. It's what we do. It's who we are. It's one of the things that you do. Secondly, practically, I loved how our parents demonstrated a good work ethic. And so for us, there was 5 of us growing up, so we didn't have the option of getting whatever you wanted whenever you wanted. It was, you want something, you better work. So I started with a paper route when I was 11 and sort of worked ever since then. And so it taught me how to work, it taught me how to save, it taught me how to budget, and I was really thankful for that. And then probably the greatest thing I was really thankful for was specifically something that happened it was either my junior or senior year. I was 2 of my best friends at the time were Mormons, and I was really wrestling with why is Mormonism bad? They're moral people, they do a lot of good deeds in the community, they go to church too, they do all these things. I mean, I just didn't necessarily get it. And one of my friends had invited me to church one service, and I figured there was no way my dad would say no. And so I went and I asked him, and I'll never forget, he told me that I could go. But he said 2 things. He said, son, I want you to make sure that before you go, you pray, and then when you go, to have an open mind. And I did that, and when I went, I realized what it was about. And I was so thankful, though, that my dad allowed that versus just throwing the gauntlet and saying, no, of course you can't go. That's crazy. We don't want to be a part of that or anything. So having that freedom to discover it on my own and to have the Lord speak to me, rather it just come from my dad, that was huge.
So any last words, Jason, or encouragement that you'd have for parents just on the subject of parenting?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say, well, number one, parenting, it's hard.
Yeah.
Man, it's hard. It's challenging. You cannot do it in your own strength. So that leads to number 2, you have got to be seeking the Lord.
Yeah.
Obviously, in your life personally, but then so that could flow, be an outflow into your children's life. It's a huge responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge responsibility. The Bible, again, we've talked about it. The Bible makes it clear. Children are important to the Lord, and so don't take it lightly. And again, if we're not being fed, if we're not praying as a family, if we're not going to church, if we're not doing these things, then really nothing's gonna go right, and it's gonna be all the more hard.
Yeah.
And then, man, parenting is fun. I love being a parent. I love my little girl. I mean, I love that she's older now.
Mm-hmm.
I can take her on trips with me. We can have conversations. She's asking me questions. We're dialoguing about God, about the Lord, and it's just a blast. So yes, it's hard. Yes, it's a blast. And in the center of that, man, is Jesus, and just getting to Him in the good times and the bad times, and realizing it's an honor and a privilege to care for these precious kids that God has blessed us with.
Yeah. Well, we love you, Jason. We love you, Redemption Church. We pray that you would pursue and proclaim Jesus with your children. It is such a blessing to be able to raise our kids in God's ways.
Amen.
And so thanks so much for talking about this somewhat difficult subject of parenting.
Thank you.
Also giving us the encouragement that it is totally worth it. And it's a great thing to be a dad, to be a mom. And so I pray you're encouraged and blessed by this. And Jason, we love you.
Thank you.